Hello, wanderers of the digital hellscape we call Internet. I am Daniel of Driving and Dragons, and I will be your guide for a while through the wonderful world of tabletop role-playing games. Bit of news that popped out from when I wrote this to now. Kyle Brink has finally taken his own advice and gotten his straight white male self out of the hobby. If you ask me, he failed in one part. He didn't do it fast enough. Godspeed and don't let the door hit you. The hobby does not need any more ass prints left on it by you, Mr. Brink. Valve adjustment on the 280ZX is complete, and while I still have some adjustments to make to get the engine running properly, I will be moving on to a slightly more fun project, which is painting the valve cover in a similar black and gold paint scheme to the rest of the car. While I go through the process of helping you add some polish to your game, I'll be cleaning, sanding, polishing, priming, masking, and painting the valve cover with high-temperature engine paint. I will apologize in advance for some blurriness, but I did some of the polish work in my garage, and the glare from the windows did some funny things. That said, most of the process was done outside in the driveway, so the footage is fine. A last little channel announcement, I'm going to be reshooting my Game Master shorts as shorts, so be on the lookout for those, and let's see if we can click some of those little 15 to 20 second nuggets of wisdom. So how are you doing it wrong this time? Today's topic is a bit more nebulous than some of the previous videos because it is purely a judgment call situation based on, for lack of a better word, the vibe at your table and with your players. Nowhere in any mainstream Game Master's guide or rulebook are you going to find a definitive guide for when and where to use the infamous rule of cool. All you simulationists and bro SR types, hang around. I know even saying the words rule of cool makes you want to click away. I can already hear you snickering and saying, how are you doing it wrong? Easy, you're doing rule of cool at all, and that's wrong. And for a purely simulationist game, you're correct, it is wrong. That said, maybe you'll get a little entertainment value out of this if nothing else. So right off the bat, we need a definition. What is the rule of cool? According to TV tropes, the rule of cool is the limit to the willing suspension of disbelief for an element is directly proportional to its awesomeness. The Wiktionary definition is the principle that anything is acceptable to do, use, wear, etc. as long as it's cool. And of course, there's the classic TTRPG definition, whose origin is not familiar to me personally, giving your players the chance to perform ridiculous stunts or bend the rules a little bit in the sake of an awesome scene. To be fair, several TTRPGs have codified this concept into their rules, and while they never say rule of cool, is a rose by any other name not a rose, to paraphrase the bard? For those wondering, Shadowrun famously told us that, say your mission is to get a Coke from a vending machine, step 4 can be pull out a rocket launcher and no one will blink an eye. While GURPS back in '86 told us the cinematic campaign is one where realism doesn't rule, because if it did, it would constantly get in the way of the story. In a cinematic campaign, swashbuckling heroes can defeat dozens of foes because the story calls for it. Spacecraft whoosh or roar in the silence of space because fast things whoosh and powerful engines roar. Rightness always overrules mere correctness. Even Cyberpunk, both in the original version and the later 2020 version, had combat rules designed to make it possible to pull off crazy stunts in a fight by ensuring standard combat mechanics allowed hits to be very possible while stacking a ton of minuses. After all, why take a 100% guaranteed single hit when you can have 2 shots at a 75% chance to hit while running full speed, hurdling a concrete barrier, and sliding across the hood of your sports car Dukes of Hazzard style? But that isn't the rule of cool we're talking about here, and everyone knows it. Shadowrun is simply referencing the fact that maybe the game isn't so fun when your police officer character spends 9 sessions at the station filling out paperwork and taking psych evals, because that's what happens when real cops shoot a single perp, let alone destroy 5 city blocks. GURPS is referencing even more mundane things, such as maybe ignoring that a laser blast from a space-age weapon isn't going to get dodged, nor is it actually visible, because that's more fun than an invisible beam silently burning a hole in your chest. And of course, in the case of Cyberpunk, it's just the rule of rules, not the rule of cool. Doing the thing I described is right there in the mechanics. No, when I talk rule of cool here, I'm talking about when a player wants to do something highly entertaining and completely fantastical, and the GM allows it at least the attempt, because it would be really cool if they pulled it off. To me, this is yet another case of where doing it wrong is a matter of application rather than principle. Rule of cool is just another tool in the GM's arsenal, and it's a perfectly valid one, particularly in narrative gameplay. Even in simulationist games, it can have its place. I'll give you an example. The party is being chased by a band of monsters. They need to escape. Resources are low and they're outnumbered, and they have an unconscious fighter that they're trying to save. It isn't looking good, and the paladin is all on board to make his last stand to buy some time. But wait, the wizard and the cleric have 2 spells left, Create Water and Burning Hands. They want to cast the Create Water spell on the floor of the hallway and then blast it with Burning Hands to create a huge cloud of steam that blinds and maybe even scalds the monsters chasing them, giving all the characters a chance to escape. What makes for a better game? Saying, dude, that little heat on that little water on the floor isn't going to do much of anything. Most of the water is going to be soaked into the cracks in the mortar before the Burning Hands even goes off. Or having the cleric describe how he wants to place the created water, and then having the wizard roll the Burning Hands damage to determine the efficacy of the effort. I think we all know that the latter is a better choice. If you want to be truly simulationist, make the parameters for success a bit more strict. Maybe he needs to create the water in a barrel or a depression in the stone and then roll at least 75% max damage on whatever the fire spell is. In this case, you have a player racking their brain to come up with a novel way to use their limited resources to achieve a result, and that is something that should always, within reason, be rewarded and encouraged. Because a player putting that much thought into a scenario is a player who is both immersed and bought in. So it seems like I'm on board with Rule of Cool. So where's the doing it wrong? Like I said, it's in application. Mainly, GMs fail in 2 serious ways. First is they openly discuss the Rule of Cool scenarios, and the second is they give no serious thought to explanation or exploitation of a ruling in the future. The latter of these is the more easily addressed. You just have to remember that while you are also a player and having fun getting wrapped up in the action is 100% while you're there, you must also remember that running the game is your responsibility. That means when a player wants to attempt some off-the-wall stunt or seemingly clever idea, you have to assess it on 2 key levels. First, is it outside the rules as intended? Or if the answer is no, and then you determine that it has the right elements to make a memorable game event, you move to the second and more important assessment. How will this ruling affect future gameplay? If you rule of cool something and give it a game-breaking impact, you can bet every dollar you have the players will exploit it far past the point it is cool anymore. In fact, this will often lead to a situation where the player who did it talks about how awesome it was, while every other player files it away as a boring, forgettable game that became all about that one joke or stunt that stayed well past its expiration date. Take my previous example about the Burning Hands Create Water steam trick. The blinding steam is an easy decision. It really is. Think about it. Burning Hands and various fiery equivalents, and Create Water, and similar spells that can do the same, are both first-level spells. Obscuring Mist is also a first-level spell. Your players are essentially trading 2 level 1 spells to emulate another level 1 spell. If one character wants to do it, let's say it's a druid with Create Water and Produce Flame, then they're trading 2 spells and 2 rounds of actions to accomplish this. There's no way your caster is going to make this a normal part of the rotation instead of just preparing an Obscuring Mist spell. However, if you rule that the steam scalds the enemy much like a burn, now you're getting into dicey territory. If you give it too much damage, you've just given your players a spell that essentially creates a damaging fog trap that may not raise to the level of a 5th level spell like Cloud Kill, but it probably is at least equivalent to a 2nd or 3rd level spell for the cost of 2 1st level spells. That's power and versatility that could be a problem. If you get too far out of hand and you say something like the monsters have to save against permanent blindness from the steam hitting their eyes, or you deal constitution damage from them inhaling it, well, you just rule of cooled your way into a party that actively seeks out ways to obscuring death steam every enemy they encounter. This is like that stupid meme where one player wants to cast Insect Swarm 100 feet over an enemy's head, and then the other wants to polymorph them into rhinos. The meme is stupid because any halfway competent DM would point out that, a half a dozen different reasons and ways that it doesn't work. An idiot DM would allow it, and then he'd see every big bad monster that he ever has killed by the Rhino Rain. So that's the easy part. Just ask 2 questions. Is there a similar ability this mimics that would be unbalancing? Or is this something that will be adaptable to more than this specific set of circumstances, and then go from there? My last Cyberpunk session, the characters were in a tank factory and ended up fighting security drones when a massive cyber tank was activated. One player had a bright idea to use a magnetic crane in the factory to grab one of the security drones, which is like a little mini tank robot, and drop it repeatedly on the cyber tank. I, of course, allowed it and even gave it pretty high damage rolls. Why? Because it was clever, gave a memorable visual, and I don't have to worry about them having an overhead magnetic crane in future encounters. What did I not do? I didn't let them use a minigun that was clearly designed for mounting on a tank as a personal weapon, because while the idea of a cyborg character running around with a 30mm cannon from an A10 sounds pretty awesome, it would break the hell out of my Cyberpunk game. So what about that first thing, the more difficult one, the one about not discussing Rule of Cool scenarios? Well, Rule of Cool is like dice fudging in that if the players know you do it, not only will they start relying on it, but when you don't do it, they'll get salty. And when you do it, it will not be as special or as impactful. Rule of Cool has to happen behind the screen, as it were. This is difficult because it is fun, and is one of the more exciting things that can happen for a game master during a session. You are hoping they succeed almost as much as they do, because describing the scene is going to be awesome. But you can't get wrapped up in discussing the plan, the ins and outs of how things work, or manipulating the world around them to shoehorn in elements needed to allow the scenario to go off in a cool way. You can't force Rule of Cool. It has to happen organically for it to be worth anything. And you have to go about your day knowing full well that the scene only played out that way, but played fast and loose with the rules of both the game and probably physics to help get it there. So that's my take on the Rule of Cool. Are you doing it wrong? Has a Rule of Cool game gone wrong in your sessions before? Has it ever ruined a game you were part of? What is the best over-the-top bullshit thing that has ever happened at your table? Let me know in the comments. Then go encourage your friends to hit the like button and leave their comments below yours. And I'll see you guys next time.